Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, as that will help grow my channel. If you'd like to subscribe, I'd appreciate that as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave those and I will respond. Again, thank you. So I have a cherry Burl. If you've been following my videos, I had the other half of this previously. That one's a bit smaller. This one's going to be a bit bigger. So with a Burl, you got two choices. I can either make this the top, which would give that a live edge, which is what I did on the previous one. Or I can make that the bottom, turn away most of the bark, make this the top. And that's what I think I'm going to do on this one, which is just the opposite of what I did on the previous video. So I'm going to use my circle jig, and I'm really digging this circle jig. With this, I just put a nail. I've already done it, but I just put a nail in the center and then put a pencil in where I want my diamond or my bowl to be, and then I spin this around. One of the advantages of this clear plexiglass is that I can see the piece underneath, and I can see, because I'm using this diameter right here, that when I get around to here, the rim is going to be missing this part, and that's okay. That's part of what I want. And over here as well, it's going to be missing part of that rim. So that's the way I'm designing it. That's part of the design feature. So we will do that, mount this up on a faceplate, and then put it on the lathe. I think I'm actually going to go a bit bigger. Did more of a broken edge. There we go. Again, the big advantage of having a clear circle jig. So you can see the edge is going to be broken here. I'll pick it back up here, and then it's going to be broken around here. I'll pick up this little piece here. That may not stay. It's not very thick. I suspect that'll come off, and it'll probably be broken from here to here. But we'll get that mounted up on the lathe and see how we make out. Now I have it mounted in my lathe on the faceplate, and I'm getting a little over 200 RPMs on it. So I'm going to go ahead and round that up, and then once we've done that, we'll continue to put some shape on it. In the beginning, it's going to be a little rough because it is out around, and I've got to take a lot of that bark off, so be a little rough to start, but once we get going, I'll speed it up and go a little better. So I left that at normal speed and normal volume, just to give you an idea of when I'm first starting to turn a piece, how slow I sometimes have to turn it, and the kind of noise that it makes. There, I'm down to at least to the diameter I'm thinking that it's going to end up. So you can see here what that rim is going to look like. It'll be solid here. Maybe this piece will be able to stay, but then obviously this is not there, this is not there. So give you a little bit of an idea. Now I'm just going to work shaping the bottom of the bowl. So here I am shaping the bottom of the bowl. I'm using my bowl gouge, doing the push cut, and I'm starting at the bottom and just coming up the bowl. Mostly at this point just removing bark, and I'm going to shape a tenon that will on the foot, which I will use to mount the bowl later. A lot to go. I'm only hitting wood in this spot, the rest is all air. And it's a little jumpy. Until I get a smoother surface, the tool is going to bounce a bit. and until I can get the speed up a bit more. Currently at 300 RPM. Good, I'm starting to hit here as well. I'm not hitting here, I probably never will, but I'd like to get down to here at least. It's not going to be a very deep bowl, be fairly shallow. So I did a little bit of work off camera just to kind of round this up a little bit more, and it's smoothed out here, and it's still rough, and definitely not a finish cut. But this is a solid edge all the way around here. Difficulty is, I get over here, this is obviously not solid, that's bark. So a lot of that's going to come away because you remember I've got to cut inside rim, and the inside is going to be just inside of this bark. So when I turn that'll all come off. What I'm concerned about is this right here. This piece right here, if you can, and I've been thinking a lot about it, this will be the inside of my rim. Well, if I come in here and cut this and remove all this, then that means I've got to have solid material here down to meet this edge. And I'm not so sure that I do within that wall thickness. I'm concerned that may just be bark, which will never hold this piece on. So this whole piece right here may come off. And I'm going to have to be conscious of that and aware of that. This piece here, hanging out here, may be a similar problem, because you see here I'm attached, but that's going to be cut away as part of the inside. The only way that can stay is if there's a piece of wood from here to here underneath this bark. So what I may do is just get a chisel and chip some of this bark away, because it's not going to be saved anyways, and then see what I'm dealing with. If there was good wood under here, actually I could save this bark. But the bark under here, no, I'm not going to save that. So I may chip that away and chip some of this away so that I can see what I'm dealing with. I do not want this piece flying off while I'm turning it. That'd be very dangerous. Now I think you can see what I'm talking about. This piece here, which I want to save, it comes up to the rim quite nicely, is just bark here. So some of this is going to come away. You can already see some holes here. So this piece is going to be cantilevered out there, but I want to save it. So I've got to be careful on the inside that I don't get too thin, that I take this part away, making this too loose. The other thing is, as that spins, if that's loose, it'll flutter and vibrate, so it's going to make it hard to get a smooth cut. So what I'm going to do is finish this top on the inside and the outside and get it sanded and get it smooth, and then continue to work my way down, because if I thin the wall out now, this here piece will flutter when it rotates. So I've got to start finishing this by sanding, which may be done power sanding but not with the lathe spinning, and then work the inside just to get the top part of that rim before I finish on the bottom. I don't often discuss this, but here I am sharpening up my negative rake scraper. Just so you know, I typically sharpen my tools every time before I start a project, and sometimes I'll end up sharpening my bowl gouge an additional 1 or 2 more times before the project is done. It depends on the wood, and it depends on how much I'm using those tools, but generally I do have to sharpen more than once during the project. Here you'll see on my bench grinder, I have a jig I have a jig that I use for my negative rake scraper, which just sets the angle that you're seeing there now. And I also sometimes use a hard tool here, such as a screwdriver, to put a burr on the end of my chisel, just to allow it to cut much better. Now I'm sharpening up my bowl gouge. With my bowl gouge, I have, again, a jig, and the tool slides into the jig, and then I have a spacer, so that allows me to set the depth of the tool in my jig so that I'm cutting the same amount off each time, so that I'm not changing the shape every time I go to sharpen the tool. So here I just remove the angle jig, and then place the jig in place for the bowl gouge. I don't know if you can see those or not, but I can see lines, and sometimes they're more obvious when it's spinning, but there, they're tool marks. The surface is relatively smooth, but there are those fine ridges. If I can see them here, I'll be able to see them on here. Now it's less obvious because of the patterning of the wood, but there's a bad one there. There's a little ripple there. There's one there, and one there. So those are what I need to get rid of before I apply the finish, because I'm ready to sand the outside of this. This is all fully shaped. So I tried my negative rake scraper, but I'm still getting a lot of bounce because of this. So I'm going to try my carbide with very light cuts with the square edge and see whether or not I can get rid of those lines. I tried the round, but the round, of course, you've got such a small area of contact, you can actually create waves, and that's what I got to get rid of. So we're going to try with the square negative rake scraper. I made a mistake there. I said that I was using my carbide negative rake scraper. I am not. They do exist. I do not have one. It is just a carbide tool with a square bit on the end of it. So here I am using the negative rake scraper. It's actually working fairly well for me. So this is after I sharpened it and put a burr on the scraper itself. And you can see here, hopefully, those lines that I was referring to earlier, which were tool marks. You can hopefully see those disappearing as I pass the tool up and down the side of the bowl. Because of the shape of this bowl and the rim that is not continuous, I did end up sanding it with the power sander, but without the lathe spinning. I sometimes can, even on these types of bowls, be able to spin the lathe and sand at the same time, but this one I was not able to, so I did just end up power sanding and with the lathe not spinning. I don't need to worry too much about it because I'm not sanding enough that I'm actually changing the shape. I'm just removing any scratches that are on the surface. Now here up close to the rim, you can see a small crack. In this case, I chose to fill that using CA glue and sawdust. You've seen me in the past on some of my videos using CA glue and coffee grinds. That works well when you've repairing a crack that has black lines, such as in spalted wood. But on this piece of wood, I didn't have anything black anywhere near that crack. I mean, there is black from bark inclusions, but there was nothing near this crack. So in this case, I decided to use sawdust rather than coffee grinds. Once the glue and sawdust has dried, then I sand it down, and it makes for nearly an invisible repair. So I've hollowed out quite a bit of the inside, and I've maintained this wing right here, which is the one I was worried about. So that's good. I'm going to go thinner. I think I'm going to push my luck a little bit. I like the look of a bit thinner. So I'm going to work the inside. So for that, I'm using my carbide. And I'll just place this here and go slowly down the side. I know I've mentioned this before, but when I'm doing that, whenever I'm going down the side of a bowl, I never look here because it's hard to see here. I always look over here, and you'll see when I start to turn, you'll see the line that I'm pushing over there coming down the side, and that's what I'm looking at. Hopefully you can see that. The other thing I can see is I still have some ripples there. I can see it when it's spinning, so I'll work on getting that a bit thinner, and then I'll work at getting those ripples out as well. I'm going to tend to get that anyways because I'm using carbide, which is round. I'll use a scraper at the end to take out those ripples and wave. Okay, I've hollowed the inside out a little bit more. I haven't sanded this. This seems pretty solid. It's still thick, so I'll probably scrape the inside of that a little bit more before I sand. I'm going to continue to work on the bottom. I need to be a bit deeper yet. Not a lot, maybe 1/4 of an inch. But I'm pretty pleased with the shape overall, and I'm pleased with the fact that I've been able to maintain this. So this bark here will stay, and that'll just be an opening in the side of the bowl. So let me know what you think about this. Whether you prefer bowls that look like this, that are artistic, or you prefer cereal type bowls. Leave a comment, let me know. As I get close to my final thickness, I use these thickness gauges to determine that the wall thickness is as thin as I want it and it's uniform. It's much more accurate than just using your fingers. Then I go back with my carbide tool and make any final adjustments that I need to until I'm satisfied with the uniformity and the final thickness of the bowl. So I'm ready to apply a finish now. It turned out that I wasn't able to do much sanding with the lathe rotating, and mainly because of this. Sometimes I can. Sometimes even though the bowl is half missing, just the angle of approach, the sharpness of this edge right here will allow me to sand it. But on this one, I ended up sanding a lot of it just with my hand drill. So still power sanding, but with the piece itself not rotating. So yeah, it's sanded up to 600 grit inside and out, and is now ready to apply finish. So I suspect for the same reason, I will not be able to apply a friction finish, and I will have to apply a spray lacquer. The bowl is finished. By that I mean the finish has been applied. And off camera, I just took my parting tool, which is this one, and I cut in there. I still have a little bit left. Normally I'd go right through with the parting tool and then I could just break it off. But because this is a Burl, I'm not sure how solid that piece is right in there. So I've got it down to less than 1/2 inch. I'm just going to take the handsaw and cut it off, and then I'll finish it up. I do not want it flying off the lathe at this point. So here's the final product. You can see now the bowl is definitely an artistic bowl. It's not one that you could put cereal in. And I have created a poll on my Facebook page just to get people's opinion, but feel free to leave a comment here and let me know what you think, whether you prefer this type of a bowl or whether you prefer a bowl that is solid all the way around. As far as the finish on the bowl, I did apply tung oil, which helps even out the color of the burl itself and darkens it up a bit. And then I applied 5 coats of spray lacquer on top of that. I thought this bowl was going to be for sale, but when my wife Pam saw it, she decided that she was going to keep it for herself.